What's going on, guys? It's Jono. Today we're going to be using Make.com to build a system to automate project management software. We're going to be using ClickUp. If you guys have never used this, it's an awesome software. It's really flexible, powerful, and the best part is it's free to get started, and they do have a free account that you can use virtually for, well, as long as you want. We're going to be using Make.com to build out a scenario where you can take information either from your CRM. In this example, we're going to be using a free CRM or Google Sheets just so that anyone can follow along. We're going to take that information and we're going to automatically generate a ClickUp project management system, something similar to this, right? Where you have a list of different projects or tasks that you need to accomplish for a particular client. There's two parts to this. Part number one is that we're going to create a project management file for a client when they pay and sign an agreement. What that looks like is when somebody goes from lead to client in the CRM, we're going to trigger this workflow to automatically generate that project management system. And then as scopes change and evolve over time, what we can do is we can later update that project management system to make it super dynamic and very powerful. So if you guys like content like this, please make sure to subscribe to my channel because I will be releasing videos like this every single day. And just so you guys know, as always, you can download this for free in the description, right? There's going to be a link down there. You just have to hit this more button and then import blueprints in, select the JSON file, import it in here, and you're going to have this exact scenario that you can start using effectively immediately. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, then let's dive into it. We're going to start with building a scenario in Make.com. And the first thing we're going to do is actually use Google Sheets as a trigger. Now, for most people watching this, I'm assuming that you'll probably have a CRM. In my case, I actually tend to use Go High Level. But for the purposes of this tutorial, we're just going to build a basic CRM using Google Sheets. And the reason we're building it on Google Sheets instead of a CRM is just because this is free, it's accessible for anyone to use, and the same principles apply from this Google Sheet into a CRM, so you can just kind of transfer it over and it's pretty simple to set up. Okay, cool. So in order for us to make this happen, what we need to do is we need to have a trigger, right? So we're gonna build a system where effectively we create a project management tool like this that kind of lists out all of the different tasks that we need to accomplish for a particular client once they've paid and signed the agreement. So we need to set up a trigger, right? And that trigger is when that person goes from lead to customer. So in a Google Sheet like this one, we have column E where we have them either labeled as a lead or as a client, right? And when they get switched from lead to client, then we want to go ahead and we want to create a system like this so that we dump all of their projects into ClickUp. So the first step we're going to do is have a trigger in Make.com. And what that trigger is going to be is it's going to be one of these instant triggers, which is watching for changes, right? So this is going to trigger when a cell is updated, watches only changes made in Google Sheets app. Sheets add-on is required. You can also do like watch new rows, for example, but the problem is that with watch new rows, it's only going to trigger when a new row is added, but we don't want to trigger this when a new row is added, right? Because the client already exists in our CRM, right? We want to trigger this when we update that person from lead to customer. So coming back in here, we'll choose watch changes. And we actually need to set up a webhook. So in order for this to happen, we actually need to install Make.com in Google Sheets so that it can actively watch changes come in that Google Sheet. So we'll click add here and we'll just do Make.com Google Sheets test. We'll save this and it's going to give us this link. There's a couple things we need to do in order to set this up appropriately so that when I run this workflow, it actually receives actions. Because right now, if I just change this to client, nothing's going to happen, right? So what we need to do is we need to come back into Google Sheets. We need to go to extensions and add-ons and get add-ons. And firstly, just type in make at the top here and just make sure that this is installed. You can see tons of people are actively using this. 283,000 people. It's a lot of people. Wow. Okay. And the next thing, once that's installed, so we're going to come back into extensions and this row should appear for you now at the bottom here, make for Google Sheets. If it doesn't, please refresh the page. And then we're going to go into the settings here. And we're going to stop this. This link that we just received here, you can copy address to clipboard. We're just going to paste that into the webhook URL down here, and the perform a function webhook URL as well. Click save. It's going to take a couple seconds to save. Perfect. And we can exit out of this. And now if we run this scenario again, when we update this, it's going to register that as a trigger, which is pretty cool. So we have received it, and we can take a look at the functions that we got here. Range, we can see the ranges of the columns, the rows. We can see the row values, right, for this particular one. So it's pulling in everything on this row when we start out this trigger. So it's grabbing all the information that we need for that client. And it's also providing us with the value that changed here, which was this going from client to lead. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Now, once we have this trigger set up, and once again, this could be your CRM, it could be Google Sheets. What we want to do is move on to actually creating this project management system in ClickUp, right? So how we're going to go about doing that is creating another module here, and we'll search for ClickUp. There's a couple different ways we can do this. Like traditionally, if you go into ClickUp, there's spaces, and then would be like a space, and then there's folders, and then there's tasks or lists, and then on a list there's tasks, right? So there's like 4 different levels of a hierarchy. But for me personally, what I like to do is I like to structure everything just in a folderless list. So I'll dump all of the projects, all of the clients into one list. And the reason I do that is just because we manage about 500 to 600 clients, maybe even more every single year. And if we had 500 or 600 folders for every single client, you'd be scrolling for days just trying to figure out, where to find a particular person or whatnot. So what we like to do is we like to just dump everything into a particular list. You come into that list, you sort by the date, and you just start executing based on what projects are due now or due in the past, right? So just always dealing with tasks on a time basis rather than a priority basis, because I find that when you deal with folders or priorities, things get swept under the rug, and we don't want things to get swept under the rug, at least in my business. So I just like to deal with it in a folderless system where there's just one list for every single client, and we just knock off tasks on a time basis. So we'll go ahead and set this up. Now, keep in mind too, you can also just come in here and you could create or duplicate a list, right, for every single client. You could certainly do that. The only problem with that is it kind of removes or negates a lot of the customization that you could get through using make.com. The reason I say that is because there's certain things that you may want to change that a template wouldn't allow for. So if you want to change the task name, it's not going to be changeable. If you want to change the content of the task, that can't be changed. If you want to assign it to different people, right? So maybe if you have an assigned user, right, for that, maybe you have a project manager or multiple project managers, and they're rotating between the clients, right, on a round robin system. So client comes in, turns to customer, gets assigned to project manager 1, next person project manager 2, next person project manager 3, fourth one back to project manager 1, and so on and so forth. This is a great way to kind of have like an if or else statement where you just assign it based on who the particular project manager is for that client. And then also due dates, all that kind of stuff. This is not super flexible. I guess it really depends. Like for my business, what I do is I take a backwards approach where we have dates for clients that are always variable, right? And because we're in the wedding space, so it just depends ultimately on the client's date of their event. And then we will set tasks like 14 days before that, or 30 days before that particular event, right? But if you're maybe in digital marketing and you know for certain that you need to get your project wrapped up in a month, things might be different. But it's just nice to have that flexibility, in my opinion, especially when you're dealing with so many different clients and there's so many different variables at play here. So that's just my 2 cents on that. Coming back here, what we're going to do is I'm actually just going to share with you guys how you can set this up with like a folder in a space. So we could create a folder. So first of all, there's tons of things here. Tasks, We can do pretty much anything with tasks or lists or folders or spaces or targets, goals, comments, tags, and the checklists, track time, dependencies. The list goes on and on and on. But what I'm going to do is kind of take a top-down approach where I'm going to assume you have a space in your ClickUp project management system. If you don't, you can go ahead and create one, but usually I think one comes default in any given account. What we're going to do is we're going to create a folder in a space. So I'm going to select from a dropdown a space that I want to choose. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose the workspace, and then the space is going to be Jono's tasks, and we can click, I'm going to say make.com ClickUp tutorial, click OK, and that is going to be created in here, right? And what we can do again is come in one more time, and we can create a list, or sorry, a folder that's within that particular, sorry, I just created the folder. So we're going to create a list inside of that particular folder. So kind of coming back here, under lists, we'll create a list. And we just need to pass in the folder ID, which we can get from the previous module here. So I'm just going to write something in here so I can just come back here. We created a folder, right? And when this folder is created, it's going to provide us with the folder ID. We can use that as a reference point to understand which folder it is that we want to pass this list that we're creating into. So we create the folder, then we know which folder it is because we can reference it in the previous module, and we're passing this list into that exact folder. And we can call this test list. And it's up to you if you want to create like content or due dates or anything like that. It really just depends on how you set things up in ClickUp. But for me personally, I don't have due dates on lists because I dump all of my projects into one list. It just works for me. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And then what we're going to do is just add one task in here, and then we'll fire this off and test it out. And we actually, you know what? I'll just go ahead and test it out right now. And I'll click run and wait for new data. And we're going to change this to client here. And it should fire off. Okay, cool. Just waiting for that list to be created. And in ClickUp, I'm just going to go into my particular tasks here. Okay, and then we have also created the list here. So make.com, click, it should be ClickUp tutorial, but we have this test list here, and there's nothing added in here, right? So we can come back here, and now what we want to do is we want to, actually add a task to it. So create an advanced task. And the reason why is because we want to reference this list that we just created here, right? So if we come in here and we grab the list ID, now this task is going to be automatically added to that particular list. Whereas in the previous module, we actually had to go in and select the particular folder and the particular list all the way down. But if that's changing over time or it's dynamic, right? We want to be able to reference the exact list that we just created here just for it to work the way we want it to work and be dynamic so that this task always ends up in this particular list here. So we, for task name, right, we'll just name it anything. Let's say check in with client by phone. It's going to be a plain text, right? You can format it however you want. And then the content is going to be any additional description that you want to provide for that particular task. Please call the client, and we can even add in the client's name here. So for example, it could be, we'll go to row values here. So now we're referencing the initial spreadsheet that we had here, which is getting the information from here. And you can just keep adding all this information. You can add so much more information, right? In my particular CRM, I probably have like 200 or 300 different points, data points on every single customer, right? So anything that you have, you can reference here, but we'll just put in, please contact this person please call this client, and we'll just leave it at that. But anything you want, you can add in here. For assignees, you could always specify like a particular user, right? Or you could also just find that particular, like what you could do is, in this case, we're going to need to pass in that user ID, right? So how we're going to do that is we're going to come back into a previous step here. Apologies, instead of actually going to a previous step, what we want to do is we want to have an if or else statement here for the assigned user. So in ClickUp, if you go into your settings, right, and let's just go into settings here. I'm going to load this into, and then we're going to go into the team. So you go into people here. You'll be able to hover over anyone and grab their particular ID. So you can copy member ID down here, come back in, and you can paste it in here, right? And if you just simply want one user, that's fine. But let's say you want to potentially change this based on the assigned user. So in this case, we have Paula, right? Now, let's say we want to assign it specifically to Paula, and if it's not Paula, then we assign it to myself. How we can go about doing that is by adding an if statement in here. And this is going to check for some conditional logic, right? So it's going to check if this is Paula, then assign it to Paula. If it's not Paula, then assign it to somebody else, right? So how we can go about doing that is referencing this column here, which is column G, where we have listed the assigned user below. So in the if statement, in the first branch, there's kind of, this is separated into 3 different sections here. So the first section is you're defining the logic, right? So 1 equals 1. If 1 equals 1, then you go down path 1 here, which is A. If not, you go down path B, right? So it's either you go down path 1 or path 2. If it's right, you go down path 1, which in this case would be A. If it's wrong, you go down path B. So how we can do this is coming back into the spreadsheet, we need to find the row where it says the assigned user, which would be G. So it's going to pull in Paula G here, right? And that's the value that we got from here. And this will change for every new client you add on. So if you have like, another 3 clients, it's going to pull in the specific row that you're referencing or the specific client. And then we want to match this to a value. So if Paula G equals Paula G, then go down path A. If not, go down path B. And what path A is we want to assign it to Paula in this particular instance. So we're going to grab her membership ID here. We're going to come back in here. We're going to say, if it's Paula, then assign this person. But if it's not Paula, then what I want to do is I want to assign myself. So we'll come back in here and we'll add my ID here. Okay, so that is how we can conditionally assign particular users depending on who is assigned as maybe the project manager for that particular project. Awesome. And then if we want to add tags, we can go ahead and do that. Maybe this is event management or project management or all that kind of stuff. The status could be to do. And then we just need to actually make sure that this status is something that's possible in this spreadsheet. In this ClickUp project management system. So if we come back into this and we go into this folder, we add a task and we just call this test. What we're looking for here is just what are the potential statuses that it could be. So we'll come in here, and we'll add a new row. And we'll go status here. So we'll add status in. And we can see that to do is in fact a status or complete. So we're good to leave this as to do. And then priority could be whatever it is. Let's just say this is high. And then due date really depends on, what you're looking for here. But let's say we want to give somebody 2 weeks, right, before a particular date. We can go ahead and assign that in the due date section here. So we have the date of the particular event here, right? So what we can do is we'll find that date in the Google Sheet here, right? And that is in column D. So we have the date in column D, and we want to assign this due date to be 2 weeks before this actual date. How that can be done is by going into the functions here. So make.com is really awesome in the sense that it has a lot of these built-in functions here, which you can essentially, a function is like executing something, right? It's like what we want to do in this case is we want to create a new date, which is, let's say, 14 days before the actual date of this event. So how we can do that is we can select add days, and it's going to pass 2 fields in. The first field here is going to be the actual date. And then the second field is how much time we want to add onto or subtract from that date. So we're going to add in the first field the actual date that we're referencing. And then we want to subtract 14 days from that so that this task is going to be due 14 days before the actual date of the event. And so we can go ahead and simply create a due date that's fully customized based on a particular event, right? And then you can select due date time. I usually don't. I usually track it just on a day-to-day, but if you do have deadlines that need to be hit immediately, you can, of course, track it here. And then estimated time, I like to just go in minutes, and this might take 15 minutes, for example. Start date, I typically just leave empty, right? A lot of the tasks that you may encounter probably will only take 15 minutes to do, right? So there's no necessarily start date that needs to be happening on these tasks. But if a task is going to span multiple days, then maybe you do want to add a start date. And then we can just go ahead and click OK. And we'll give this a shot and we'll run this scenario. What likely will happen is it's going to throw an error because this particular folder actually already exists. So we're going to wait for new data. We'll change this to client. Oops, we'll change it to lead. And we'll see what happens here. So folder name already taken. So how we can go about doing this to make it a unique value every single time is in the name of the folder, what we can do is we can actually just put the client's name here. Or if they have like an ID associated with them, we could just put that ID because that's going to be unique every single time. We'll come back in here and we'll run this one more time and we'll wait for new data. We'll select client again and let's see this run. Okay, sweet. So this has been created and we have a new folder here. And in this new folder, we have this test list. And we should also have that task that was just created in here, right? So it has the tag, it has the name of the task, it has a description down below, and the only thing that it's missing has priority, due date, everything. The only thing it's actually missing is that assignee. So clearly that assignee did not work. And the reason it didn't work is because Paula doesn't have access to this particular folder because it's locked and it's private to me. Otherwise, it would have worked, right? So it would have just assigned Paula or me had she had access to this. So that's just one particular task that we've created so far. Then of course you can come back in here and keep adding additional tasks. So we'll just go ahead and clone this and then we'll add this in here. And then maybe what we want to do is have team meeting. And this team meeting will be, please have a group call with everyone on the team to go over progress with this person's project. And then once again, it could be like, if this equals Paula G, then assign it to this person. If not, assign it to myself. I'm just going to say, for this purpose, I'm actually just going to remove her from this because I only want to be the sole person that's being assigned to this particular task. And then maybe instead of minus 14 days, we go minus 21 days and we click OK, and we can run this again. And before we run it, we're just going to go ahead and actually delete this particular folder here. Otherwise, it's going to give us the same error as before. And copy and paste that in, delete it, and use existing data. Sweet. So we just created another project management file here, and we'll go into the folder, into the test list, and now we have two particular tasks. You can see the first one still, Paula doesn't have access to this, so it's not going to be assigned to her, but in this case, it was assigned to me. And then from here, right, you can build out as many tasks as you want, right? And the idea here for me is just to really create a task for everything that needs to be done on that particular project file, right? So what I like to do is break down any individual step into a task, put it into ClickUp so that when that project is closed, then we have a task associated with every single manual action that has to be done. So it's cataloged and it's actionable, it's actioned, and we're actually having somebody assigned to that task and responsible for completing it at a specific time, right? So what this will do is keep your organization really organized, right? Because things are going to get done, and if they're not getting done, then you can follow up as to what's not getting done, why it's not getting done, and who is not getting the job done, which is pretty sweet. Now, there's just one other thing that I want to go over in this particular video. I actually had to refilm this last night because I realized that I forgot to change the camera to going back to screen share. So it was just this like 4-minute clip of my face just typing, trying to explain something super complicated. Anyways, this is like the biggest face palm of my life when I looked back and almost published the video with just my face. But anyways, just a couple last things on this workflow, guys. If you do want to filter this, it's just so that you maybe you only want this workflow to run if the particular person is changed from lead to client, right? So only when they paid, only when they've signed, only when you've converted them from a lead to a client this runs. We can simply do that by setting up a filter here, right? And with this filter, what we're going to do here is we're just going to make sure that that the value in column E is client, right? So this has to be equal to client. And as long as it's equal to client, then we are good to go. So we can go ahead and filter that. And lastly, let's say that instead of, just stopping there, right? Maybe we want to make this workflow dynamic so that at any point in time, we can go back and we can update it, right? Maybe it's not something that's static where, hey, just when they convert to a client, we create this workflow, but rather we make it so that at any point in time, you can add on additional things. If there's an upsell that the client opts in for, if you want to change the scope of the project, by just clicking one extra button, we can simply go back and make sure that we add on to this existing project. And it's really, really simple to do. So all we have to do is make sure that we save this list ID, right? So practically what that means is we have this list that we built, right? We just need to save this list ID so that at any point in time, if we want to add on to it, we can reference that list and we can add on to it, right? So we have to save the list ID here, right? So we grab the list ID and we save it into Google Sheets, right? So we can have a column like this where we save the list ID, and at any point in time, we can reference that list ID and add to it. So what we can simply do here is add on a Google Sheet, okay? And we're going to update a row. And with the updating a row, this is a bit tedious just because we have to go into the URL and we have to re-add in the Google Sheet module again. Which always takes a bit of time. Just make sure the connection is the right one, or else you'll get that error that I just received. We can remove mapping here, and we're just gonna select the first sheet, which if you're creating a brand new sheet, you're only gonna have access to one. And then you're gonna have to add a row, right? And right now, we don't know exactly what row this particular client is on. I mean, in this example, we do, it's on row 2, but if you have 700 clients, you might not know which row to reference, right? So we're gonna skip over this for maybe 10 seconds and we're gonna come back. All we have to do here is we just have to make sure that the list ID that we're getting here is passed in. So we're just gonna filter by list ID here. and we can just go ahead and choose list ID, right? And when it gets to this stage, then we're going to pass that list ID back in here. It's going to save so that we can recall it, right? So that's all we're doing, is just passing the right list ID. Okay, sweet. Now, I'm going to put default row number 2, but we actually have to go one step ahead and find that row number, right? So how do we know that it's row 2? And this is where we have to do a 2-step lookup, right? So we're going to add another module here, and this module is going to be before the previous Google Sheet module. We're going to add in another one, and it's going to be search rows, right? So we're trying to find this particular row. If there's 600 rows, how do we find that row? Well, the best way to do it is by searching by unique identifier, right? And typically, if you have a CRM, I always like to add the ID of the client here, because that ID will always be unique. But the next best option is the email here, because every client is going to have a unique email, right? So that's an easy bet. So we can go ahead and set up this module one more time. We're just going to copy in this particular ID up top here. And this is the repetitive nature of make.com, unfortunately. But once again, we ran into this error because we just have to set up the right connection, right? So once that connection is set up, we're just going to select the right Google Sheet, and then we are presented with a filtering option here, right? And with the filtering option, we just want to select whatever unique identifier we're going to try and match, right? In this instance, it's going to be the email. Not in this email, it's going to be the instance. In this instance, it'll be the email. And that is going to be equal to the email that we originally had for the clients in the first place. So at the bottom, we can go into row values here and just pass in the email. And why this makes sense is because this whole workflow originally was triggered because we had an update in this Google Sheet. And when we updated the Google Sheet, it copies all the information on that row, right? So by virtue of us updating this Google Sheet, we already had that client's email. And now we're just using that reference email and we're passing it back in on this lookup to find the row, right? And then we're passing it right back in here. I'm just gonna refresh this page just because make.com is acting weird and I can't seem to grab anything there. So just bear with me here for 1 second. So that's essentially how you can do like a 2-step lookup in make.com. The only other thing that you probably could do as well is potentially, if you already have the row number here, so I'm just going to delete this too, you can search by row number and you can see it's right here. We would just pass that in. Okay, perfect. And potentially maybe if we just go all the way down to the bottom here, it might have the row start, which is 2. So you could technically skip that and just paste the row step in there. We're going to save it. And now we're good to go. We have a search lookup where it effectively finds the right row. And then we update that list ID into the spreadsheet here so that now we can recall it. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete this folder just so that we can run this workflow one more time. We'll click use existing data. It's going to pass through and we have updated the list ID right here. Now, if you wanted to, you could create another workflow that references that list ID and updates or adds additional tasks onto that particular list. So if we come into the scenario section here and we actually, hold on a second, we'd have to create another path here. So we'd add a module. You can only have one trigger or one watch step per Google Sheet. So you can't add multiple different scenarios in make.com to do this. It has to be in one. And we'll just have a filter set up so that this condition is watching only for when clients turn from leads to clients, right? We're replacing it with this initial filter here. And we'll delete the word filter. And then this is going to watch for, let's say, an upsell, right? So maybe we come back here, we have upsell services. And this could be, for example, a checkbox. And when this is checked true, you can see the value here changes to true if it's checked, or false if it's unchecked. We can watch to see if that value changes to true and then start this workflow. So in this instance, we can select from row values, and row I is going to be what we're looking for here. If I is equal to, and I always like putting it equal to case insensitive, true, then we're going to proceed down this row. And we can go ahead and create a task, and pass in that list ID here, right? So we're going to go into row values and go to, I believe it's H, right? List ID. And now we can reference that list and create a third task. Here is, and actually I'm just going to copy this. Oops, not this module. I'm going to copy this task here, bring it down here, delete this module, just auto align that, and we'll redo this. We'll have the list ID as H, and then instead of team meeting, we might do upsell. And then here's a description of the upsell. We're going to assign it to myself, so on and so forth. Maybe this is due in 7 days before. We can click OK, save, and then we can run, wait for new data. And we're going to uncheck this, which is going to cause it to run. And it's not going to pass any filter. We'll run it one more time, wait for new data. We're going to select this upsell service again. And this time it's going to run and pass to this section. Add a particular task onto that list. And coming back in here to that list that we created, we should have 3 separate tasks on it now, right? Let's just take a look and see if it worked. Okay, beautiful. So we have 3 separate tasks. And really with just a simple system like this, you can virtually fully automate your project management systems, not only just at one time, right, when the client is created, but you can fully automate the creation, deletion, or updating tasks or lists over time as the scopes of the project evolve per client, right? So of course you could make like a template in ClickUp, and you could just have something really basic. But using Make.com, the cool thing is you can fully customize every single part of every single task, whether it's the title or the description or the due date or assigning it to specific people or tags or whatever it is, right? So it gets really, really, becomes very powerful, right, in allowing you to achieve your end goals. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like content like this, make sure to subscribe down below. Make sure to give me a thumbs up if you found it useful. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Thanks, and bye-bye.